citizen with me. People like you do not just live in places like this. Supervisor Victor Langford's smile was polished and cruel as he stepped onto Commander Layla Voss's porch, his vest brushing her shoulder like it had a deed to the house. Papers now. His hand hovered at his belt. Not for safety, for show. An agent laughed behind him. Whole streets filming. She will fold. Commander Layla Voss did not flinch. Her hands stayed open by instinct, posture locked the way it gets when chaos is measured, not feared. Supervisor Victor Langford lowered his voice, savoring it. Anonymous tip says, "You're illegal, and today I believe it." He had no idea who he was humiliating or how badly this moment would cost him. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. The morning sun cast long shadows across Commander Layla Voss's front lawn as the ICE agents tightened their formation. Her package lay forgotten on the doorstep, a mundane reminder of the normal morning that had just shattered. She kept her hands visible, years of tactical training kicking in automatically. "Mom, we need to see your documentation now." Supervisor Victor Langford's voice carried artificial authority pitched to carry across the quiet street. Neighbors' curtains twitched. Car doors slammed as people delayed leaving for work, watching the scene unfold. Across the street, young neighbor Javier Ruiz's hands trembled slightly as he held his phone steady, recording everything. The morning light caught the lens, making it briefly glint. One of the agents noticed, shooting him a threatening glare. "I would like to see your warrant," Commander Layla Voss stated calmly, her voice measured and clear. She remained perfectly still on her front steps, noting each agent's position, their gear, their body language. Everything about this felt wrong. Their aggressive stance, the lack of paperwork, the theatrical blocking of the street. Supervisor Victor Langford's smile turned ugly. "You do not get to make demands here. Show us proof of legal status, or we will have to assume the worst." He emphasized worst with obvious relish. "I am a legal resident in my own home," Commander Layla Voss replied. "You need probable cause and a warrant for this kind of operation." Listen to her trying to lecture us about the law. One of the other agents sneered. They always think they know better. Supervisor Victor Langford took another step closer, invading her personal space. His badge read Supervisor, but he had angled it to make the number unreadable. "Anonymous tip gives us all the cause we need. Unless you have something to hide." Commander Layla Voss noted how the other agents had spread out using standard containment positioning. They were creating a show of force for the growing audience of neighbors, while also cutting off potential escape routes. Professional, practiced, predatory. "Hey!" Javier Ruiz's young voice carried across the street. "She has not done anything wrong. You cannot just shut that camera off, kid." An agent barked, starting to move toward him. "This is a federal operation. Stay where you are, please." Commander Layla Voss called out to Javier Ruiz, her tone calm but commanding. "You have every right to film." She turned back to Supervisor Victor Langford. "And you know that is true." Supervisor Victor Langford's face darkened. He gestured to his men who moved in closer. Always trying to make things difficult. Always got to be the troublemaker. His voice dropped lower, meant for her ears only. "But that is what your kind does, is it not? Push back because problems act entitled." More neighbors had emerged onto their porches now. Mr. Elena Rivera from next door stood with her arms crossed, her face a mask of concern. Mr. Harlan Brooks from across the way was on his phone, likely calling someone for help. But help would not come in time. Commander Layla Voss could read the situation clearly. "I'm going to reach for my phone," she stated clearly, movement slow and deliberate. "I will call my lawyer." No phones, Supervisor Victor Langford snapped, nodding to the agent nearest her. The man immediately moved to grab her arm, his grip unnecessarily tight. "Take your hands off me," Commander Layla Voss warned, her voice still steady, but carrying an edge of steel. "Now you have no legal right." "Stop resisting," Supervisor Victor Langford shouted, loud enough for the whole street to hear. The performance was beginning in earnest now. Another agent grabbed her other arm, both men using far more force than necessary, against someone who had not shown any aggression. "She is not resisting," Javier Ruiz yelled, his phone still recording. "You are hurting her." Commander Layla Voss felt the cold metal of handcuffs against her wrist. She kept her breathing controlled, analyzing her options. The agents were escalating intentionally, trying to provoke a reaction they could use to justify whatever came next. Their grips were amateur, trained for intimidation rather than proper restraint technique. Last chance, Supervisor Victor Langford leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "Show us papers right now, or this gets much worse for you." The metal of the cuffs bit deeper. Neighbors were shouting now. Javier Ruiz had moved closer, still filming despite the agent's threats. The morning sun caught the badge on Supervisor Victor Langford's chest, and Commander Layla Voss caught his full name and number at last. She committed it to memory, along with every other detail of this moment. The entire scene had unfolded rapidly, but Commander Layla Voss could see exactly how it would play out. These men were not here to verify anything. They had already decided who she was and what would happen next. The operation had been designed to humiliate, to demonstrate power, to remind everyone watching that they could be next. The peaceful morning shattered as an agent yanked Commander Layla Voss's arm, the force unnecessary and deliberately painful. She stumbled against her front door. The wooden frame shuddered from the impact. The sound drew more neighbors from their homes, faces appearing on porches up and down the street. "Stop resisting!" the agent holding her shouted. Though Commander Layla Voss had not moved, his grip tightened until her fingers began to tingle. "I am not resisting," Commander Layla Voss stated clearly, keeping her voice steady despite the growing pressure on her joints. She maintained her practiced stillness, developed through years of high-stakes situations far more dangerous than this. Another agent slammed his palm against her shoulder, driving her harder into the door frame. The impact rattled her teeth, but she did not flinch. Mrs. Elena Rivera gasped from her porch next door, clutching her morning coffee mug like a shield. "What is happening? Why are you hurting her?" Javier Ruiz's voice cracked with teenage outrage as he recorded everything on his phone. The morning light caught his lens perfectly, documenting each abuse in crystal clear detail. "Ma'am, you need to comply immediately," one agent sneered, his badge conveniently turned away from view. "Though you people always act confused when the law catches up, do not you?" Commander Layla Voss kept her hands open and visible, her breathing controlled. She had been trained to endure far worse than this. Each insult, each unnecessary shove, each moment of escalation, she cataloged it all with professional precision. "I have the right to know why I am being detained," she said calmly, even as they twisted her arm further behind her back. "Rights?" An agent laughed, the sound ugly and sharp in the morning air. "You have no rights until you prove you deserve them." More neighbors emerged now. Mr. Harlan Brooks stood on his lawn in his bathrobe, phone pressed to his ear. The Rivera family watched from their driveway, their children's faces pressed against their car windows. The street had become an unwilling audience to this display of power. "Hey, back off with that camera, kid." An agent suddenly broke formation, charging toward Javier Ruiz with aggressive intent. The teenager held his ground, hands shaking, but phone still steady. "I am allowed to film. This is wrong, and everyone needs to see." The agent's hand shot out, knocking the phone from Javier Ruiz's grip. It clattered onto the sidewalk. Before Javier Ruiz could react, the agent's boot came down hard on the device, grinding metal and glass into the concrete. "Oops," the agent smirked, twisting his heel. "Should not interfere with federal operations. That is illegal." Javier Ruiz's voice cracked with fury and fear. "You cannot do that." "File a complaint," the agent mocked, turning back toward Commander Layla Voss. Through it all, Commander Layla Voss remained still, absorbing each escalation with practiced control. Her military training screamed at her to act. But she waited, documented, evaluated until one agent, frustrated by her composure, deliberately wrenched her arm past its natural range. The crack of overstressed joints cut through the morning air. Something shifted in Commander Layla Voss's eyes, a microscopic change that only someone trained to notice would catch. In one fluid motion, she pivoted on her back foot, using the agent's own momentum against him. Her movements were precise, economical, nothing wasted. The agent holding her arm found himself suddenly off balance, his grip broken by leverage points he did not even know existed. He hit the concrete with a heavy thud that knocked the wind from his lungs. Another agent lunged forward, but met only air as Commander Layla Voss sidestepped, letting his own charge carry him stumbling past her. The entire sequence unfolded in moments. Silence fell over the street. Neighbors stood frozen, coffee mugs and phones forgotten in their hands. The remaining agents stared, hands hovering uncertainly over weapons, confronted with something their training had not prepared them for: competence. Commander Layla Voss stood perfectly centered on her front steps, hands still open, breathing steady, no wasted movement, no dramatic stance. Just the absolute stillness of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. The morning sun caught the sweat on her brow, the only sign of exertion. Supervisor Victor Langford's face had drained of color as he stared at her, his earlier smugness evaporating like morning dew. The agent on the ground wheezed, trying to regain his breath. The one who had stumbled regained his balance, but did not move closer. Uncertainty clear in his posture. The confrontation was over, not through chaos or luck, but through pure skill that could not be mistaken for anything else. The neighborhood held its collective breath, watching as their understanding of the woman who lived at number 247 underwent a seismic shift. For a moment, even the birds seemed to have gone quiet, as if nature itself was waiting to see what would happen next. The gentle morning breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and the faint echo of distant traffic. A surreal backdrop to the scene frozen on Commander Layla Voss's front steps. The morning air crackled with tension as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Commander Layla Voss remained centered on her front steps, her stance relaxed but ready. The agent she had thrown was slowly getting to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment. His colleague, who had stumbled, kept his distance, newfound respect evident in his cautious posture. Supervisor Victor Langford's complexion shifted from pale to scarlet. His hands trembled as he yanked his radio from his belt, nearly dropping it. "Code 3! Code 3!" He bellowed into the device, voice cracking. "I need immediate backup at this location." Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the mild morning temperature. His eyes darted between Commander Layla Voss and his scattered team, searching for any remnant of his previous control. Finding none, his volume increased to compensate. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he demanded, jabbing a finger toward Commander Layla Voss. Spittle flew from his lips as he continued. "You just assaulted federal agents. You are going away for a long time." Mrs. Elena Rivera had moved closer to her fence line, phone still recording. Mr. Harlan Brooks had joined her, his bathrobe fluttering in the morning breeze. Other neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by Supervisor Victor Langford's shouting. The street had become an amphitheater with Commander Layla Voss's front steps as center stage. Commander Layla Voss's response came without theatrics, her voice carrying clearly across the tense silence. Delta Force. Active command. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of impact spreading through the gathered crowd. One of the younger agents straightened suddenly, recognition dawning on his face. Another cursed under his breath, taking an unconscious step backward. Holy. Someone whispered from the growing crowd. Radios crackled to life up and down the street as agents began urgent whispered conversations with their superiors. The agent who had destroyed Javier Ruiz's phone now looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest rock. A woman walking her dog stopped at the edge of the scene. Phone already raised. "Did she say Delta Force?" she asked loudly. The question bounced from person to person, growing in volume with each repetition. The Delta Force, Special Forces. Oh my God. Supervisor Victor Langford's authority evaporated like morning mist. His previous swagger deflated as he realized he had managed to assault one of the military's most elite operators. On camera, no less. His hands opened and closed reflexively as he processed this new reality. The teenage neighbor, Javier Ruiz, had borrowed his mother's phone and was still recording. "What is Delta Force?" he asked, his voice carrying in the quiet. "Special Operations," Mr. Harlan Brooks answered, his voice filled with awe. The retired Army veteran straightened his bathrobe with newfound purpose. The best of the best. They do not even officially exist. More whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone had pulled up a search on their phone, reading quietly about counterterrorism and classified missions. The neighbors who had watched Commander Layla Voss jog past their homes for months now saw her in an entirely new light. The morning sun continued its climb, casting long shadows across Commander Layla Voss's yard. A newspaper delivery car crept past, the driver slowing to stare at the scene. The sound of distant sirens grew closer. Supervisor Victor Langford's backup responding to his call. Commander Layla Voss had not moved, had not raised her voice, had not made any attempt to capitalize on the revelation. She stood like someone who had nothing to prove, her calm presence more commanding than any shouted order. Several of the original agents began looking at their watches, suddenly remembering other appointments. One murmured something about paperwork and started edging toward his vehicle. The temporary holding pattern was clear. Nobody wanted to be the next one to put hands on a Delta Force commander. Supervisor Victor Langford's face twisted as he watched his authority dissolve. His career flashed before his eyes. The comfortable office, the power to make others squirm, the satisfaction of being untouchable, all of it threatened by this woman who refused to behave like a victim. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple as he realized he had two choices: back down and lose face in front of his team, or double down and pray his superiors would back his play. His ego made the decision before his brain could catch up. "You think that matters here?" he snarled, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "You think a fancy title puts you above the law?" The gathering crowd muttered in disapproval. Someone booed. Supervisor Victor Langford's head snapped toward the sound, his face darkening further. "I do not care if you are Delta Force, Navy SEALs, or the Queen of England," he continued, voice rising to drown out the crowd's reaction. His authority was crumbling, and he knew only one way to respond. More force, more volume, more dominance. "You resisted federal officers. You attacked my men." The backup sirens grew louder, multiple vehicles by the sound of it. Supervisor Victor Langford drew himself up, clinging to his last shreds of control. His next words came out as a desperate snarl, loud enough to echo off the houses. "Take her anyway." The agents moved with artificial confidence, forming a tight circle around Commander Layla Voss. Their earlier hesitation had transformed into desperate compliance as Supervisor Victor Langford barked orders. Two agents drew their tasers, hands trembling slightly as they aimed at her chest. For officer safety, Supervisor Victor Langford announced loudly, his voice carrying across the lawn. "Subject has demonstrated hostile intent and combat capabilities." Commander Layla Voss remained still, her military training screaming against every survival instinct. She knew escalation would only feed their narrative. Her eyes locked onto Supervisor Victor Langford's face, memorizing every detail. The sweat on his upper lip, the tension in his jaw, the way his left eye twitched. "Last warning," one agent called out, his taser wavering. "On the ground now." The neighborhood watched in horrified silence. Mrs. Elena Rivera clutched her phone tighter, tears streaming down her face as she continued recording. Mr. Harlan Brooks had taken 2 steps forward before his wife grabbed his arm, holding him back. The taser barbs struck Commander Layla Voss's chest like angry hornets. Her muscles locked as electricity coursed through her body. She fought to stay upright, but physics won. Her knees buckled and she hit the grass hard. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. "Stop it," Javier Ruiz shouted from across the street. "You cannot do this." Supervisor Victor Langford spun toward the teenager's voice. "Shut your mouth, kid, unless you want to join her." 2 agents grabbed Commander Layla Voss's arms, dragging her across her own lawn. Her combat boots left twin trails in the morning dew. The grass was cool against her cheek, the sensory detail oddly sharp despite the aftermath of the taser. Her wrists were wrenched behind her back, cuffs ratcheting too tight, the metal bit into her skin. "Phone check now." Supervisor Victor Langford ordered his team. "Confiscate everything recording. Interference with federal agents is a felony." Agents spread out, snatching phones from shaking hands. Mrs. Elena Rivera tried to back away, but an agent cornered her against the fence. "Hand it over, ma'am. Do not make this worse." Javier Ruiz's broken phone lay scattered across the concrete, its screen a spiderweb of cracks. The memory card had popped loose in the impact, and an agent's boot came down on it deliberately. "Oops," he smirked, grinding the plastic into fragments. Mr. Harlan Brooks found his voice. "This is wrong. She is a soldier, for God's sake. She is a subject resisting lawful authority." Supervisor Victor Langford shot back. "Anyone else want to question federal jurisdiction? We have room for more." The neighbors fell silent, but their faces showed everything: disgust, fear, helpless rage. A child started crying somewhere, quickly hushed by a parent. Commander Layla Voss's heart hammered against her ribs as they half-carried, half-dragged her toward the waiting van. The taser's effects were fading, replaced by a deep muscle ache. But her mind remained crystal clear, cataloging every detail with military precision. She recognized the model of van, standard issue for ICE field operations. She counted agents, noted positions, memorized faces. Most importantly, she understood exactly what Supervisor Victor Langford had just done. This was not a mistake anymore. This was knowing and willful detention of a federal warfighter without cause. They lifted her roughly into the van's cargo area. No seats, just bare metal floor. Standard procedure for short transport to processing. Her shoulders slammed against the interior wall as they shoved her inside. "Enjoy the ride," Supervisor Victor Langford sneered. Maybe you will learn some respect for real authority." Commander Layla Voss said nothing. Her silence seemed to unnerve him more than any response could have. He avoided her direct gaze as he stepped back. The van's rear doors swung shut with a heavy clang, cutting off her view of the neighborhood. Through the metal wall, she heard Supervisor Victor Langford shouting final threats at the witnesses. The engine rumbled to life. Sirens wailed in the distance, local police responding far too late to matter. The van lurched forward, tires crunching over her scattered mail. Commander Layla Voss braced herself against the movement, using her legs to stay somewhat stable. The metal floor was cold through her running clothes. The cuffs bit deeper with every bump and turn. Morning traffic sounds filtered through the van's walls. Car horns, acceleration, normal life continuing while hers had just been upended. The sirens faded behind them, growing fainter until they merged with the city's background noise. Commander Layla Voss focused on her breathing using techniques honed through years of operations. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and steady. She ran combat calculations in her head, assessing resources and vulnerabilities. Her wrists were already going numb from the too tight cuffs, but that was a problem for later. The van hit a pothole, bouncing her against the wall again. She could smell stale sweat and fear in the cargo area, evidence of previous occupants who had made this same journey under similar circumstances. But unlike those others, Commander Layla Voss understood exactly what Supervisor Victor Langford had set in motion. This was not just a bad day anymore. This was not even simple abuse of power. This was a federal officer knowingly detaining a member of an elite military unit without cause. This was multiple agents participating in or witnessing the same crime. This was destruction of evidence, intimidation of witnesses, excessive force, and half a dozen other violations that would end careers once exposed. Supervisor Victor Langford had not just made a mistake. He had started a war he did not understand with an opponent he had gravely underestimated. But that realization would come later. For now, the van carried her deeper into the city, away from her home, into a system designed to make people disappear. Late morning sunlight filtered through narrow windows high in the processing center's holding room, casting harsh shadows across institutional green walls. Commander Layla Voss sat perfectly still on the metal bench, her wrists raw from hours in the same tight cuffs. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. Through the thin walls, she could hear the constant buzz of fluorescent lights and fragments of conversation from the processing area. Phones rang unanswered. Printers churned out paperwork. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke she could not make out. An agent appeared at the reinforced glass window, tapping his pen against a clipboard. "Cole," he called out, deliberately mispronouncing her name. "Says here you are claiming military status." "Not claiming. I am active Delta Force Command." Commander Layla Voss kept her voice steady professional. "My ID number is..." Yeah. He waved his hand dismissively. "Everyone has got a story. Stand up. Face the wall." Two guards entered, their boots squeaking on the linoleum. They patted her down again, the third time since arrival, before escorting her to a processing desk. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder out here, reflecting off white walls and metal surfaces. "Name?" The intake officer did not look up from his computer. "Commander Layla Voss." "My military ID, sorry. Systems showing Sarah Cole's." He shrugged. "Probably what was entered at pickup." "Cannot change it now." "That is incorrect. I need to make a phone call. Phones are down for maintenance." He stamped several forms without reading them. "Next station." They moved her through a series of checkpoints, each one stripping away another layer of identity. Her running clothes were exchanged for an orange jumpsuit. Her shoelaces were confiscated. Her requests for legal representation were met with blank stares or vague promises to pass it along. In the medical screening room, a tired-looking nurse barely glanced at the abrasions on Commander Layla Voss's wrists from the too tight cuffs. Minor irritation, she noted. Nothing requiring treatment. I need to contact my commanding officer. Commander Layla Voss tried again. This is a serious above my pay grade. The nurse cut her off. I just do intake screening. Outside the facility's walls, Commander Layla Voss could not know that fragments of Javier Ruiz's video were already spreading across social media. Clips showing ICE agents attacking a black woman on her own porch. The taser deployment, the phone destruction, all of it uploaded and taken down repeatedly as accounts were flagged and suspended. Local news stations teased the story in brief segments, but offered no follow-up, no investigation, no demands for accountability. By early afternoon, an ICE spokesperson appeared at a hastily arranged press conference. He stood at a podium, hands clasped professionally, voice calm and rehearsed. This morning's enforcement action was conducted lawfully and appropriately, he stated. While we cannot comment on specific cases, all procedures were followed according to established protocol. Any claims to the contrary are being investigated internally. Back inside, Commander Layla Voss sat in yet another holding room, watching shadows creep across the floor as the day wore on. Her requests for a phone call were met with different excuses each time. The public defender's office was notified but never reached. Her military ID number was entered incorrectly 3 times before being dismissed as unverifiable. She recognized the pattern. This was not chaos or incompetence. It was design. Every mistake created another layer of bureaucratic distance between her and accountability. Every system error bought them more time. Every policy requirement pushed her deeper into a maze built to exhaust resistance. The afternoon crawled by in 15-minute increments, marked by guard shifts and overhead announcements. Commander Layla Voss maintained her composure, her military training providing a framework for endurance. She logged each interaction, each denial, each procedural requirement in her memory. The system expected anger, expected protests. She gave them neither. Around shift change, new guards appeared, checking clipboards and comparing notes. Through the window, Commander Layla Voss could see the parking lot shadows lengthening as evening approached. Transport time, a guard announced, entering with restraints. Stand up, face the wall. They secured her in a chain between 2 other detainees. The group shuffled through a series of security doors, emerging into the cooling evening air. A white bus waited in the loading area, its windows tinted dark, its destination undisclosed. The other detainees spoke quietly in Spanish and Creole, their voices tight with fear. Commander Layla Voss noted the bus company's name, a private contractor she had never heard of. The driver did not wear a uniform, just a company polo shirt with no visible ID. They were loaded efficiently, secured to the seats with additional restraints. No paperwork was visible. No destination was announced. The bus's engine rumbled to life as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. Through the tinted window, Commander Layla Voss watched the processing center recede. The facility's lights flickered on automatically as dusk approached, illuminating the American flag that hung limp and still in the evening air. Traffic moved normally on the nearby streets. Drivers unaware or unconcerned about the bus and its cargo of disappeared people. The bus turned onto the main road, merging with commuter traffic heading home for the day. No one looked twice at the unmarked vehicle. No one questioned its purpose or destination. The system had worked exactly as designed, processing resistance into silence, turning outrage into paperwork, making inconvenient people vanish into bureaucratic shadows. The bus rolled to a stop in front of Redstone Transitional Detention Facility. As night settled over the desert, floodlights cast harsh shadows across razor wire and concrete walls. The facility sprawled low against the landscape, utilitarian and institutional, its windows narrow and reinforced. Guards efficiently unloaded detainees, their movements practiced and impersonal. Inside, the intake area hummed with fluorescent lights and machinery. The air felt thick with disinfectant and processed air. Administrator Claire Whitaker stood at the intake desk, her tailored blazer and pearls incongruous against the institutional backdrop. She smiled with corporate precision, clipboard in hand, as though welcoming guests to a hotel. "Good evening," she said, voice pleasant but empty. "I am Administrator Whitaker. Welcome to Redstone." She checked her papers. "Ah, yes, our special guest, the commander." Two female guards led Commander Layla Voss to a processing room. "Strip search," one announced flatly. "Standard procedure." Commander Layla Voss complied silently, enduring the invasive search with military discipline. The guards' latex gloves snapped loudly in the small space. Their movements were mechanical, designed to emphasize powerlessness. "Arms up, Commander." One guard smirked, drawing out the title. "We would not want to miss anything important." After the search, they issued her facility clothing, thin cotton in dull orange, several sizes too large. The pants dragged under her heels. The shirt hung loose, making her look diminished. "Medical screening," Administrator Whitaker announced, appearing in the doorway. She gestured to a small exam room where a tired-looking nurse waited. "Any conditions we should know about?" the nurse asked without looking up from her form. "The cuff injuries need treatment," Commander Layla Voss stated calmly. "And the taser burns." "Minor irritation," the nurse interrupted, checking boxes rapidly. "Nothing urgent. Drink water." Administrator Whitaker smiled apologetically. "We provide excellent medical care here, but we have to prioritize serious conditions. I am sure you understand." They led her through security doors to the housing unit. The space was packed tight. Bunks crowded together, belongings crammed into small lockers. The air felt stale and heavy with too many bodies breathing the same recycled oxygen. Women lay on bunks or sat in small groups, speaking softly in multiple languages. Their faces showed bone-deep exhaustion. Some watched Commander Layla Voss with dull curiosity. Others kept their eyes down, trained by experience to avoid attention. "Your assigned bunk," a guard indicated, pointing to an upper mattress. "Count is at 600. Medical requests go through proper channels. No exceptions." "Yes, Commander," another guard added with exaggerated deference. "Would not want to upset the chain of command." Commander Layla Voss climbed onto the thin mattress, noting how it sagged in the middle. From this vantage point, she had a clear view of the unit's layout. 2 guard stations, 4 cameras with obvious blind spots, emergency exits that stayed locked. She logged the details automatically, her training turning observation into tactical assessment. The guard's patrol pattern was obvious. Clockwise rotation, 15-minute intervals, 3 blind spots between loops. Staff changes happened at predictable times. Camera coverage failed to reach several corners. The facility's security relied more on bureaucracy than actual vigilance. A woman in the next bunk coughed deeply, the sound wet and concerning. No one responded. No staff checked. The message was clear. Illness was expected. Help was not. "Medical line is tomorrow," someone whispered in Spanish. But they never have enough time to see everyone. Commander Layla Voss watched Administrator Whitaker conduct an evening walkthrough, heels clicking precisely on concrete. She stopped to speak with guards, her corporate smile never wavering. This was a business transaction to her. Human cargo managed for profit margins. A young woman sobbed quietly in the corner, fresh from intake. The sound carried in the enclosed space. Other detainees offered quiet comfort in various languages. A solidarity born of shared powerlessness. First night's the hardest. An older woman said softly, "But you learn to sleep through anything here." The overhead lights flickered. A warning. Women hurried to finish bathroom routines and last-minute preparations. Some knelt quickly beside bunks. Prayers whispered urgently before darkness. Without warning, the lights shut off completely. The darkness felt absolute for several seconds before eyes adjusted to faint light from the guard station. The unit filled with nighttime sounds. Coughing, crying, murmured prayers in a dozen languages. Someone shifted on a creaking mattress. Another stifled a sob. Commander Layla Voss lay still, fully awake, cataloging each sound and movement. The guard's flashlight beam swept past on schedule. Keys jingled at the station. A door opened and closed somewhere in the facility. The ventilation system hummed steadily, recycling the same tired air. More coughing echoed in the darkness. Deep, concerning sounds that should have prompted medical attention. Whispered conversations carried across the unit. Detainees sharing fragments of hope and fear in muted tones. "My children," someone whispered in the dark. 3 weeks now. No word. The lawyer promised. Another voice responded. But no one comes. "Pray with me, sister." A third voice offered quietly. The night settled into a rhythm of suppressed sounds, the language of contained humanity. Bodies shifted on thin mattresses. Someone hummed softly, a lullaby perhaps. The guard's boots marked time with mechanical precision. Commander Layla Voss remained motionless, but her mind worked steadily, mapping the facility's patterns. Every sound, every movement, every procedure revealed something useful. The system's power relied on isolation and hopelessness, but patterns meant predictability. Predictability created opportunity. A woman began to pray softly in Arabic, her words a whispered lifeline in the darkness. Others joined in their own languages: Spanish, Creole, Mandarin, a multilingual chorus of faith and desperation. The sound wove through the shadows, bridging the spaces between bunks, between lives interrupted and futures uncertain. The guard's flashlight beam cut through the darkness again, right on schedule. Keys jingled. The ventilation hummed. In the corner, someone still sobbed quietly. The sound muffled by a thin blanket. The fluorescent light snapped on, harsh and sudden. Guards moved through the unit, banging batons against metal bed frames. "Line up. Count time." A guard's voice echoed off concrete walls. "Everyone on your feet." Women scrambled from bunks, pulling on orange uniforms, rushing to form lines. Some had clearly slept in their clothes, prepared for this daily ritual. The air filled with shuffling feet and whispered prayers. Commander Layla Voss took her place, noting how the woman next to her trembled slightly. Maria Santiago. She had learned last night. 3 weeks detained. Diabetes, requiring regular insulin. The medical staff kept losing her paperwork, eyes forward, no talking. Guard Jenkins paced the line, his badge gleaming under fluorescent lights. Administrator Whitaker stood at the unit entrance, tablet in hand, watching with corporate detachment. 5 minutes into count, it happened. A woman 3 spaces down swayed visibly. Her hand clutched her chest, face gray with pain. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the morning chill. "I cannot. My chest," she gasped in heavily accented English. "Please help." "Stay in line," Jenkins barked. "No disruptions during count." The woman's knees buckled. 2 detainees moved to catch her, but Jenkins stepped forward threateningly. Back in line now. She needs medical attention, Commander Layla Voss stated firmly, her command voice cutting through the tension. This could be cardiac. Another backseat doctor. Jenkins sneered. It is just anxiety. They all panic sometimes. The woman slumped to the floor, breathing in sharp, painful gasps. Her eyes rolled back, showing whites. Someone started praying rapidly in Spanish. Administrator Whitaker finally looked up from her tablet. If you are truly unwell, we will add you to medical call-out, she said smoothly. But disrupting count means disciplinary action. Your choice. The woman tried to respond, but could only wheeze. Her fingers clawed at her chest. Medical emergency, Commander Layla Voss announced loudly, making sure other guards could hear. Patient presenting with chest pain and respiratory distress. Jenkins stepped closer, baton tapping meaningfully against his leg. One more word, and you are in segregation, Commander. The woman on the floor made a terrible choking sound. Still, no one moved to help. Back to count positions, Administrator Whitaker ordered crisply. We will handle this after proper procedures are complete. The count dragged on. The woman lay gasping on the cold floor, ignored by staff. Other detainees watched helplessly, fear and anger mixing in their eyes. Finally, 2 medical techs arrived with a wheelchair. They lifted the semi-conscious woman without gentleness or urgency. Her head lolled as they wheeled her out. Medical call-out starts at. Administrator Whitaker announced to the unit, submit requests through proper channels. She clicked away on her heels, tablet tucked under her arm. Commander Layla Voss immediately walked to the guard station and requested a medical form. The guard handed it over with obvious reluctance. She filled it out carefully, documenting everything she had observed. Time of onset, symptoms, staff response, delay in treatment. Her military training showed in the precise clinical details. This needs immediate processing, she stated, holding out the completed form. The guard dropped it in an overflowing tray, marked pending review without even glancing at it. Medical will get to it when they get to it. Throughout the morning, women whispered about the incident. The woman's name was Lucia Mendez. She had been complaining of chest pain for days. Medical kept telling her to drink water and rest. By afternoon, rumors spread that Lucia had been taken to an outside hospital. No official announcement was made. Her bunk was stripped and reassigned within hours. Commander Layla Voss watched the process unfold with cold clarity. How quickly a person could vanish here, how easily suffering could be buried in paperwork and procedure. She began constructing a mental record, knowing paper could be destroyed, but memory could preserve truth. Initial collapse during count. Medical techs arrive. Patient removed from unit. Bunk stripped. New detainee assigned to space. She memorized faces, names, badge numbers. Jenkins, who denied help. Administrator Whitaker, who prioritized procedure over life. The medical techs who arrived too late with too little concern. Each detail carefully stored away. Other women noticed her watching. A few approached quietly throughout the day, sharing their own stories of medical neglect and whispers. My sister waited weeks for insulin. They ignore pregnancy complications. My friend's infection spread because they would not treat it. Commander Layla Voss listened, memorizing each account. The pattern was clear. Neglect was not an accident here. It was policy. That evening, she heard Jenkins and another guard, Rodriguez, talking outside the unit door. Their voices carried through the window. Heard the chest pain one go in the ambulance, Rodriguez said. Jenkins laughed. Yeah, another one who could not hack it. They never learn. Making a scene just makes it worse. At least the paperwork is easier when they go off-site, Rodriguez replied. Administrator Whitaker likes a clean chart. They moved away, still chuckling. In the unit, women bowed their heads. Some cried quietly. Others stared ahead with empty eyes, perhaps wondering who would be next. Commander Layla Voss lay on her bunk, memorizing every word she had heard, every laugh, every casual dismissal of human life. The system relied on forgetting, on erasing its victims from memory as easily as names from papers. But she would remember every detail, every face, every moment that proved this was not justice or security. It was calculated cruelty masked by bureaucracy. Above her, the fluorescent lights flickered, ready for another night of manufactured darkness, another night of controlled despair, another night of waiting to see who might not survive until morning. The recreation yard at Redstone was a concrete rectangle surrounded by chain link and razor wire. Women walked in slow circles or sat on metal benches, shoulders hunched against the evening chill. Guards watched from elevated positions, their shadows stretching long across the yard. Commander Layla Voss paced the perimeter, counting steps, noting camera positions. Paces north to south, east to west. 3 blind spots where fencing created shadows. 2 guards per shift, rotating positions every 30 minutes. "Ma'am." A quiet voice interrupted her observations. Guard Tom Keller stood nearby, maintaining careful distance. His uniform was perfectly pressed, badge polished to a shine. "Could I speak with you a moment?" Commander Layla Voss studied him. Mid-30s, clean-cut, nervous energy beneath his professional demeanor. She had noticed him watching her during meals, his expression troubled. "Of course, Officer Keller," she replied evenly. He glanced around before stepping closer. "What happened to you?" "It is not right," he whispered. "Some of us know that." Commander Layla Voss remained silent, face neutral. Let him talk. "Look, I can help," Officer Keller continued. "There is a proper grievance process if you file the right paperwork through the right channels." He slipped a form from his pocket, folding it small. "I will make sure it gets where it needs to go." Commander Layla Voss accepted the paper without expression, though warning bells rang in her mind. His eagerness felt rehearsed, his sympathy too convenient. "That is very kind," she said carefully. "Just be detailed," Officer Keller added. "Names, dates, everything that happened. I will handle it personally." Commander Layla Voss nodded once, tucking the form away. She had seen this before in combat zones. The friendly local official who offered help while feeding intelligence to the enemy. The seemingly sympathetic guard who set up prisoners for attempted escape. "Recreation time is ending," another guard shouted. "Line up for return to units." Officer Keller stepped back, resuming his professional distance. "Good luck, ma'am," he said, loud enough to be heard. Back in her bunk, Commander Layla Voss examined the form under harsh fluorescent light. Standard grievance paperwork. But something about the routing numbers seemed wrong. She had memorized facility procedures during intake. This did not match. Still, she began filling it out, choosing words with military precision. No emotions, just facts. Times, locations, badge numbers, a record that could not be twisted. Women around her prepared for lights out, changing clothes, washing faces, whispering prayers. The unit smelled of industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies. Someone 2 bunks over coughed wetly. Another ignored medical request. Commander Layla Voss had just finished writing when heavy boots approached. 3 guards entered the unit, equipment jingling. "Cole." The lead guard barked. "On your feet, hands where we can see them." Women scrambled away as the guards surrounded her bunk. Through the unit windows, she glimpsed Officer Keller watching, face carefully blank. Turn around, hands behind your back. Cold steel closed around her wrists. The guards marched her out past frightened faces and whispered prayers. They brought her to an administrative office where Administrator Whitaker waited, looking annoyed at the late hour. On her desk lay Commander Layla Voss's grievance form, already altered with angry scratches and threatening language that was not her writing. Threatening staff is a serious offense, Administrator Whitaker said smoothly. Guard Keller reported you made aggressive statements during recreation. This form confirms a pattern of hostility. Commander Layla Voss saw Officer Keller through the office window, still watching, still blank-faced. A man who had learned to survive by helping power hurt people. The form has been altered, Commander Layla Voss stated flatly. Are you accusing my staff of misconduct? Administrator Whitaker's smile was sharp. That is another violation. You have left us no choice but to place you in administrative segregation. For everyone's safety, of course. The guards grabbed her arms, steering her down stark hallways. Their boots echoed off concrete. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. They stopped at a heavy metal door marked Isolation Unit 3. Inside was a bare cell, narrow bunk, steel toilet, nothing else. The space felt hungry, designed to devour hope and time. Strip search, a guard ordered. Commander Layla Voss endured the humiliation with military discipline, focusing on memorizing details, guard badges, camera positions, the sound of keys. Every piece of information was ammunition. They took her uniform, leaving only a thin smock. The concrete floor bit cold through paper slippers. You should have just kept quiet, one guard muttered as they prepared to leave. Played along like everyone else. Commander Layla Voss stood at parade rest, spine straight, eyes forward. She had survived worse cells in worse places. They wanted to break her spirit by proving no one could be trusted. Instead, they had just confirmed what she needed to know. The whole system was compromised. From Officer Keller's false sympathy to Administrator Whitaker's corporate cruelty, the door slammed shut with a metallic boom. Darkness swallowed the cell, broken only by harsh fluorescent light bleeding under the door. The silence pressed in, thick as armor. In the distance, she heard Officer Keller's voice as he passed. It is better this way. She will learn. But Commander Layla Voss stood unmoving in the center of her cell, already turning isolation into advantage. They thought they were burying her. They did not understand. Sometimes the best position for gathering intelligence was from inside the machine. The isolation cell's fluorescent lights had long since blurred into a constant buzzing presence. Commander Layla Voss sat on the thin mattress back, straight against the concrete wall, maintaining her internal clock despite the unchanging light. Time had passed since they had locked her away. The sound of boots in the corridor made her shift slightly, muscles ready. Multiple sets moving with purpose. Keys jingled. Then the viewing slot in her door scraped open. Stand up, Cole. Face the wall, hands behind your back. Commander Layla Voss complied with measured movements. The door opened, and 3 guards entered. Through the doorway, she glimpsed Administrator Whitaker in her pressed suit, accompanied by an unfamiliar man in military dress blues. Commander Voss, the military officer said, his voice carrying authority. I am Major Donovan Reed, Judge Advocate General's office. We have confirmed your status and current assignment. This detention was unauthorized. Administrator Whitaker's corporate smile had developed a slight strain. There appears to have been a miscommunication regarding Commander Voss's documentation. We are fully cooperating to resolve. Save it. Major Reed cut her off. Judge Harper has ordered her immediate transfer out of ICE custody. I have the paperwork here. Commander Layla Voss remained facing the wall, but her senses tracked every movement, every micro-expression reflected in the polished steel toilet. Administrator Whitaker's perfectly manicured nails drumming against her tablet, the guards shifting uneasily. Of course, Administrator Whitaker said smoothly. We will begin transfer procedures right away. Outside the facility, engines rumbled as vehicles arrived. Through the narrow window, Commander Layla Voss caught fragments of noise, chanting car horns, the distinct sound of protest. Quite a crowd out there, Major Reed commented. Local news has been covering this story all morning. Veterans groups, church leaders, community organizations, they are all demanding answers. A guard approached with shackles. Commander Layla Voss let them chain her wrists and ankles, noting how they avoided meeting her eyes. The restraints were excessive for transfer, but she recognized the intent. One final show of control. They escorted her through the facility's sterile corridors. Other detainees pressed against cell windows, watching silently. In the medical wing, the nurse, who had ignored countless requests, suddenly found paperwork to study. Guard Keller was nowhere to be seen. The intake area smelled of disinfectant and fear. Commander Layla Voss's personal belongings, the clothes she had worn on her porch that morning, her house keys, her military ID, were returned in a plastic bag. They did not let her change. The transfer vehicle is ready, Administrator Whitaker announced, still maintaining her professional veneer. We have arranged secure transport too. I will handle the arrangements, Major Reed interrupted. Commander Voss is no longer in ICE custody. Through the administrative windows, Commander Layla Voss could see the crowd more clearly now. Dozens of people lined the facility fence. Signs demanded justice. American flags waved. A group of veterans in uniform stood at attention facing the building. News vans crowded the parking lot. Cameras pointed at the entrance. Reporters shouted questions at facility staff who hurried past, heads down. The story had broken wide open. A black SUV with government plates waited at the sally port, flanked by 2 police cruisers. As they approached the vehicle, Commander Layla Voss cataloged details. Diplomatic plates, Federal Protective Service markings, proper security protocols. Everything appeared legitimate. The judge was very clear. Major Reed explained as a guard unlocked her shackles. You are to be transferred to military custody immediately. We have MPS waiting at Fort Carson to process you back into proper status. Relief flickered through Commander Layla Voss's chest. Small, dangerous, quickly suppressed. She had seen too many moments of apparent victory turn hollow. The crowd's chanting grew louder as the Sallyport gate opened. Signs became readable. Free Commander Voss. Stop ICE abuse. Veterans deserve better. Administrator Whitaker stepped forward one last time, hand extended professionally. Commander, we regret any inconvenience. Commander Layla Voss looked straight through her, denying her the closure of a polite fiction. After a moment, Administrator Whitaker's hand dropped. The SUV's interior was cool and clean. Major Reed sat beside her, while 2 armed federal agents took the front seats. As they pulled away, Commander Layla Voss caught a final glimpse of the facility. Stark walls, razor wire, and the crowd still growing outside its gates. They merged onto the highway heading south. Commander Layla Voss watched mile markers pass, tracking their route. The driver maintained proper protocol, staying in formation with the police escorts. Everything seemed correct. Yet something in her gut remained coiled tight. Major Reed reviewed paperwork, occasionally speaking into a phone. The federal agents maintained professional silence. Through the tinted windows, Commander Layla Voss noted they had passed exits that would have led to Fort Carson. Then the SUV's turn signal clicked on. They were leaving the highway, taking an unmarked exit that curved away from the city. The police escorts continued straight ahead, their red and blue lights disappearing into traffic. Commander Layla Voss sat motionless, mind racing. The road ahead led nowhere listed in her transfer documents. The vehicle's interior suddenly felt smaller, more confined, but she kept her breathing steady, her posture relaxed. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous moments required the greatest control. The SUV continued down the empty road as afternoon shadows lengthened across the pavement. No other cars followed. No landmarks offered reference. They were heading somewhere deliberately unlisted, and Commander Layla Voss could only wait to learn why. The SUV pulled into a loading bay, lit by harsh floodlights. The building looked more like a warehouse than a detention center. No signs, no markings, just concrete walls and security cameras. Commander Layla Voss noted the complete absence of other vehicles or personnel. This was not standard procedure. This was deliberate isolation. Major Reed's professional demeanor had vanished. He now moved with the stiff urgency of someone following unwanted orders. The federal agents flanked Commander Layla Voss as they led her inside, their earlier formality replaced by cold efficiency. The intake area was smaller than Redstone's, just a single desk and a metal detector. A bored-looking clerk barely glanced up from his computer as they entered. The room smelled of bleach and old coffee. "Processing transfer," the clerk muttered, fingers tapping at his keyboard. "Name?" "Commander Layla Voss," Major Reed stated. The clerk squinted at his screen. Not seeing that god Layla Stone, though, that must be it. Typos happen. His tone made it clear this was no accident. Commander Layla Voss watched her identity being erased with a few keystrokes. Her military rank, her proper name, her entire documented existence, all vanishing behind deliberate errors designed to make her unfindable. They took her fingerprints again, photographed her again, issued her new detention wear. Every step of processing was performed as if she were a new arrival with no prior record. The methodical erasure of her previous detention was happening right in front of her. "Phone call?" Commander Layla Voss asked, knowing the answer. The clerk did not even look up. "Systems down. Maybe tomorrow." A familiar voice came from the hallway, dripping with satisfaction. "Now, is not this more appropriate?" Supervisor Victor Langford stepped into view, hands clasped behind his back. He had changed into a fresh uniform, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The smirk on his face spoke of a man who believed he had won. "Paperwork is a beautiful thing," he said, moving closer. "When done correctly, it can make anything disappear." He emphasized the last word, savoring it. "No more cameras here, no protesters, no interfering mayors or journalists, just proper procedure." Commander Layla Voss met his gaze steadily, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a response. Her silence only seemed to encourage him. "You know what I love most about this job?" Supervisor Victor Langford continued, circling her like a shark. "Teaching people where they really stand. All that military status you were so proud of does not mean anything now. Here, you are just another number in the system. A very carefully managed number." Through the small window in the intake area, Commander Layla Voss could see a TV mounted in the guard break room. The local news was playing silently. Mayor Curtis Beckett stood at a podium, his face a mask of practiced concern as he addressed reporters. Even without audio, Commander Layla Voss could read his body language, the careful gestures, the diplomatic non-answers. His lips formed familiar phrases, conducting a review, urging patience, respecting federal jurisdiction. The perfect performance of a man, determined not to help. The guards processed her belongings methodically, logging each item with exaggerated care. Her military ID was accidentally dropped, the corner cracking against the floor. Her dog tags were cataloged under miscellaneous metal items. Every action designed to strip away her identity, her dignity, her existence in the outside world. They led her down a narrow corridor lined with empty cells. The facility was eerily quiet compared to Redstone. No voices, no movement, just the buzz of fluorescent lights and the echo of their footsteps. This was not a normal detention center. This was a place designed for people meant to be forgotten. The cell they assigned her was bare, except for a thin mattress and a stainless steel toilet sink combination. The door closed with a heavy clang that seemed to seal her off from the world entirely. Through her tiny window, Commander Layla Voss could see just a slice of the night sky. Somewhere out there, people were protesting, demanding answers, waving signs with her name. But they were looking in the wrong place, fighting the wrong battle. The system had simply absorbed their pressure and redirected it, like a martial artist turning an opponent's force against them. Commander Layla Voss sat on the hard mattress, back straight, hands relaxed on her knees. She closed her eyes, but her mind remained sharp, alert. The time for enduring was over. Now was the time for strategy. She began mapping the facility in her mind, the guard rotations she had observed, the camera positions, the security procedures. She noted which guards avoided eye contact, which ones showed hints of discomfort with their roles. She recalled every name mentioned, every snippet of conversation overheard. The system that held her was not just bars and walls. It was procedures, paperwork, and people. It operated on assumptions of powerlessness, on the expectation that its victims would be too broken or scared to fight back effectively. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had given her time to study their methods, to understand their weaknesses. Supervisor Victor Langford and his allies were betting on her disappearing quietly, becoming another ghost in their machine. They thought isolation would break her spirit. Instead, it had given her clarity. Every aspect of her training, the tactical analysis, the psychological warfare, the strategic planning could be turned against this system. In the darkness of her cell, Commander Layla Voss began to plan, not an escape that would only validate their actions. No, she would dismantle their operation from within using their own procedures and protocols against them. They thought they had buried her. They were about to learn they had only given her a foundation to build upon. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, harsh and sudden. 2 guards appeared at Commander Layla Voss's cell door, their faces arranged in professional masks that did not quite hide their anticipation. Medical screening, the taller guard announced, his voice flat. Stand and face the wall. Commander Layla Voss complied, noting how they positioned themselves. Too close, too eager for an excuse. Their hands stayed near their batons as they cuffed her. The restraints clicked several notches tighter than necessary, but Commander Layla Voss kept her expression neutral. The hallways were empty at this hour. Their footsteps echoed off bare concrete walls as they led her through a maze of corridors. Commander Layla Voss mapped each turn, each security door, building her mental layout of the facility. This was not the way to medical. They were heading deeper into the administrative section, where cameras were conspicuously absent. They stopped at a heavy door marked Storage B7. The shorter guard unlocked it, revealing a bare concrete room with a metal table bolted to the floor. No windows, no cameras, no witnesses. Inside, the taller guard ordered, shoving Commander Layla Voss forward. The room smelled of cleaning chemicals and something metallic. Old bloodstains marked the floor despite attempts to scrub them away. This was not their first medical screening. Supervisor Victor Langford stepped in behind them, closing the door with deliberate slowness. He had changed into casual clothes, no uniform, no badge, nothing official to document. He pulled latex gloves from his pocket, snapping them on with practiced ease. "Good morning, Commander," he said, making her rank sound like an insult. "I hope you are finding our accommodations educational." Commander Layla Voss remained silent, watching him circle the room. His movements were relaxed, almost playful, a predator confident in his territory. "You know what I find fascinating?" Supervisor Victor Langford continued, leaning against the table. "How quickly important things become meaningless. Take your military record, for instance." He pulled a folder from under his arm, very impressive on paper. Combat deployments, commendations, classified operations, all just irrelevant paperwork. Now he opened the folder, making a show of reading. All those missions defending America. And here you are detained as a potential threat to national security. Ironic, is it not? Commander Layla Voss kept her breathing steady, her stance balanced. She had endured worse interrogations, but this was different. This was not about information. It was about breaking her spirit. "We have some paperwork of our own to handle," Supervisor Victor Langford said, producing another document. "A simple incident report. Seems you became combative during routine processing. Attacked 2 officers. Very unfortunate." He held out a pen. "Sign it, and maybe we can discuss improving your conditions." Commander Layla Voss looked at the report, then back at Supervisor Victor Langford. Her silence was answer enough. His face hardened. "I was afraid you would be difficult about this." He nodded to the guards. "Make sure she understands the situation." The taller guard grabbed Commander Layla Voss's cuffed hands, yanking them up behind her back until her shoulders screamed. The other guard drove his knee into her thigh, targeting the nerve cluster. Pain shot through her leg, but Commander Layla Voss refused to cry out. "Still playing soldier?" Supervisor Victor Langford mocked. "This is not a battlefield. There is no honor here. No medals for endurance. You are just another detainee who does not know when to submit." They kept her there for hours. Pressure points, stress positions, calculated pain that left no obvious marks. Through it all, Commander Layla Voss remained silent, focusing on her breathing, memorizing every detail. Names muttered, techniques used, timing of shift changes outside. When they finally tired of their game, Supervisor Victor Langford leaned in close. "This is just the beginning. Everyone breaks eventually, even Delta Force commanders." They dragged her to the actual medical unit where a middle-aged nurse waited. The woman's eyes widened slightly at Commander Layla Voss's condition, but she kept her face professionally blank until the guard stepped outside. As she gently examined Commander Layla Voss's bruises, the nurse whispered, "I saw them take you to B7. I know what they do there." Her hands trembled slightly as she applied antiseptic. "This is not right. None of this is right." Commander Layla Voss studied the nurse's face, the fear in her eyes, but also determination. Here was someone with access, with knowledge, and most importantly, with a conscience she could not ignore. The guards returned too soon, impatient to return Commander Layla Voss to her cell. As they led her away, she caught the nurse's gaze one last time, The woman quickly looked down at her charts, but not before Commander Layla Voss recognized the mix of terror and resolve brewed in her expression. Back in her cell, Commander Layla Voss carefully stretched her injured muscles, processing everything she had learned. Supervisor Victor Langford had meant to break her will. Instead, he had revealed the facility's pressure points, the gaps in surveillance, the shift patterns, and most crucially, the staff members whose humanity had not been completely corrupted by the system. Her body ached, but her mind remained sharp. Each burst of pain was a reminder, a data point to be used. They thought they were teaching her helplessness. In reality, they were showing her exactly how their machine worked and where it could be dismantled. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the narrow windows of the detention center as Nurse Sofia Ramirez pushed her medication cart down the sterile hallway. Her hands shook slightly as she checked each cell number, her nurse's badge feeling heavier than usual against her chest. The regular guards had grown used to her presence, barely glancing up from their phones as she made her rounds. To them, she was just another cog in the machine, distributing pills and checking vitals with mechanical precision. They did not notice how her clipboard held more than just medication charts, or how her eyes lingered on certain inmates longer than others. As she approached Commander Layla Voss's cell, Nurse Sofia Ramirez's heart hammered against her ribs. She had watched them bring Commander Layla Voss back from medical screening that morning, saw how she moved with careful precision despite obvious pain. It was not the first time she had witnessed such treatment. But something about Commander Layla Voss's quiet strength had finally crystallized Nurse Sofia Ramirez's growing horror into resolve. "Evening medications," Nurse Sofia Ramirez announced, her voice steady despite her nerves. She slipped a paper cup with 2 pills through the cell door's meal slot, along with a tiny folded scrap of paper hidden beneath. Commander Layla Voss accepted the cup without expression, but her fingers brushed Nurse Sofia Ramirez's deliberately as she took it. The message passed between them in seconds, invisible to the cameras above. Later, during the chaos of shift change, Nurse Sofia Ramirez found herself in the perfect position. New guards were arriving. Day shift was leaving, and the cameras in Section C had been malfunctioning since lunch. A regular occurrence that maintenance never seemed to fix. "I need to check her stitches," Nurse Sofia Ramirez told the departing guard, gesturing at Commander Layla Voss's cell. It was a lie. Commander Layla Voss had no stitches, but the guard merely shrugged, too eager to leave to question it. Inside the cell, Nurse Sofia Ramirez's professional demeanor cracked. "I cannot do this anymore," she whispered, hands trembling as she pretended to examine Commander Layla Voss's arm. "Recently, a man died of diabetic shock because they would not let me give him insulin. They said his paperwork was not in order." Commander Layla Voss sat perfectly still, her voice barely audible. "How long have you been documenting?" "For months," Nurse Sofia Ramirez replied. "I started taking pictures of the logs after the second preventable death. They make us change the cause of death. Backdate requests for care that never happened. I have proof. Everything is on my personal phone, locked in my locker. Digital evidence is vulnerable." Commander Layla Voss cautioned. "They can claim manipulation or delete files remotely. You need paper copies stored off-site." Nurse Sofia Ramirez nodded. "I started printing key documents last month. Death certificates that do not match our internal records. Care requests that disappeared. Orders to deny treatment that came directly from administration." Outside the cell, voices echoed as new guards settled in. Nurse Sofia Ramirez's hands moved automatically through the motions of a medical check while Commander Layla Voss spoke. "Listen carefully," Commander Layla Voss instructed. "Do not trust facility email or phones. No digital trails. When you leave tonight, take only original documents or certified copies. Nothing that could be called a theft of records. Focus on official papers that show contradictions, signatures that do not match, dates that cannot be right. There is a reporter, Nurse Sofia Ramirez said. She has been covering the protests outside City Hall. The veterans and church groups have been there for days demanding action. Through the tiny window, they could hear those protests. Even now, a distant chorus of voices carried on the evening wind. The crowd had grown larger each day, led by veterans who recognized Commander Layla Voss's name and elderly church members who brought lawn chairs and refused to leave. Mayor Curtis Beckett is trying to ignore them, Nurse Sofia Ramirez continued. But they are not letting him. Earlier, Pastor Marcus Hale led his entire congregation to City Hall. They are reading the names of everyone who has died in detention over and over. Commander Layla Voss's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. The mayor is vulnerable to public pressure. He will not act on principle, but he will act to save his career. It is working, Nurse Sofia Ramirez confirmed. Earlier, he ordered the police chief to cooperate with the state investigation. The chief tried to refuse, but Mayor Curtis Beckett threatened to replace him. For the first time, I saw real fear on the administrator's face when she heard. As if to emphasize the point, a new sound cut through the evening air. Sirens, but not the usual patrol cars. These were different, more urgent, drawing closer to the facility. That is state police, Commander Layla Voss observed quietly. And probably investigators. They will want to secure records before anything can be destroyed. Nurse Sofia Ramirez straightened up, adjusting her uniform. I have to finish my rounds. But tonight, when my shift ends, she left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. Be careful, Commander Layla Voss warned. They will be watching everyone more closely now. Do not change your routine. Do not act nervous. Just do your job until you walk out that door. Nurse Sofia Ramirez nodded, gathering her medical supplies with practiced efficiency. As she turned to leave, she paused. I should have done this sooner. All those people. You are doing it now. Commander Layla Voss cut her off. That is what matters. The cell door clanged shut behind Nurse Sofia Ramirez as she pushed her cart toward the next row of cells. Through the window, the sirens grew louder, more insistent. Change was coming. Not in tweets or viral videos, but in official letterhead and court orders. The machine was about to meet something it could not ignore. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when a fleet of unmarked vehicles swept into the detention facility's parking lot. State police cruisers flanked them, lights flashing. Investigators and windbreakers emblazoned with State Attorney General poured out carrying boxes and equipment. Supervisor Victor Langford stood in the facility's main entrance, his usual swagger deflating as an investigator thrust a thick stack of papers into his hands. Federal warrant, the woman announced. Step aside. This is a federal facility. Supervisor Victor Langford blustered, his face reddening. You have no jurisdiction here. I will need to clear this with your superiors, have been notified. The investigator cut him off. Federal immunity does not cover criminal acts outside the scope of duties. Unlawful detention, assault, evidence tampering. Those are not policy. They are felonies. Teams of investigators moved through the building with methodical precision. They seized computers, copied hard drives, and collected surveillance footage. In the security office, technicians recovered data from confiscated phones, including fragments from Javier Ruiz's damaged device. The morning shift guards watched helplessly as their stations were documented and sealed. Several tried calling supervisors only to find their phones had been temporarily blocked. Standard procedure during a raid. Nurse Sofia Ramirez arrived for her shift just as investigators reached the medical wing. She walked straight to the lead investigator, hands steady now, and produced a thick manila envelope. "Everything is here," she said quietly. "Death certificates, falsified treatment logs, denial of care orders. I have been documenting it for months." The investigator opened the envelope, comparing Nurse Sofia Ramirez's records to data they had already pulled from the facility's servers. "Times match perfectly," she muttered. "Discrepancies in official causes of death. Multiple instances of backdated paperwork." She looked up at Nurse Sofia Ramirez. "We will need your formal statement." A commotion erupted near the main entrance as Administrator Claire Whitaker arrived, designer heels clicking against the floor tiles. "This is completely unnecessary," she announced to no one in particular. "We are in full compliance with our contract requirements." "Your contract does not authorize criminal negligence," an investigator replied, not looking up from his tablet, "or conspiracy to violate civil rights." Administrator Whitaker's corporate polish cracked. "We follow all required procedures like falsifying death certificates." The investigator finally looked up or ordering staff to deny medical care. Those procedures in a conference room turned temporary interview space. Investigators separated the guards for questioning. Most stuck to rehearsed answers about following protocol. But one young guard faced with evidence of his involvement in Commander Layla Voss's illegal transfer broke down. "Supervisor Victor Langford said we had to make her disappear." He stammered, said she was causing trouble, making the agency look bad. "We were supposed to lose her paperwork, route her through different facilities until people stopped asking questions." Down in the detention blocks, investigators photographed Commander Layla Voss's injuries and took her statement. She recounted everything with military precision, times, names, specific threats. When they asked about the morning medical screening, she described Supervisor Victor Langford's taunts verbatim. Camera crews had gathered outside, alerted by police radio traffic. They filmed as Commander Layla Voss emerged from the facility, walking under her own power despite visible bruises. She did not speak, did not need to. The evidence spoke for her. Supervisor Victor Langford tried retreating to his office, but investigators were already there, boxing up files. His computer had been disconnected, its hard drive removed for analysis. His phone was being dumped for deleted messages. "This is harassment," he snapped. "I was conducting legitimate enforcement actions against a confirmed U.S. military commander." An investigator looked up from a file. After verification of her identity. "That is not enforcement. That is retaliation." "You cannot prove intent," Supervisor Victor Langford said, but his voice wavered. The investigator smiled thinly. "Actually, we can. Your emails about teaching her a lesson, the orders to transfer her off books, the threats to guards about keeping quiet." She closed the file. "Want to see the rest?" In the hallway where he had once cornered Commander Layla Voss, where he had smiled while ordering guards to hurt her, Supervisor Victor Langford found himself surrounded by state police. An investigator read him his rights. As cameras recorded through the windows, Supervisor Victor Langford: "You are under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, assault under color of authority." The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Unlike Commander Layla Voss's detention, this arrest was by the book, fully documented and completely legal. Supervisor Victor Langford's face twisted as he recognized the irony. He was being treated with all the procedural care he had denied others. Guards and staff watched silently as he was led out. No one moved to help him. No one spoke in his defense. The machine he had used to crush others had finally jammed on truth. Undeniable, documented truth that no amount of bureaucratic maneuvering could erase. Nurse Sofia Ramirez stood in the medical wing doorway, watching investigators box up years of falsified records. For the first time in months, her hands were completely steady. Down the hall, other staff members were already talking to investigators, offering their own stories now that the dam had broken. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher as more official vehicles arrived. The facility's parking lot filled with forensics teams, document specialists, and civil rights attorneys. The system that had run on darkness was being exposed to light and would never be the same. The courthouse steps teemed with people under the hot afternoon sun. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like metal trees. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with church groups, retirees, and families. The crowd had started gathering before dawn, drawn by rumors of major announcements. State Attorney General Marion Walsh approached the podium, flanked by federal prosecutors and civil rights attorneys. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as she adjusted the microphone. Behind her, Commander Layla Voss stood quietly in her formal military uniform, ribbons and medals catching the sunlight. Following a comprehensive investigation, Attorney General Walsh began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. We are announcing multiple felony charges against former ICE Supervisor Victor Langford and several other officials involved in the unlawful detention and assault of Commander Layla Voss. She held up a thick document. The indictments detail a pattern of deliberate civil rights violations, including assault under color of authority, unlawful detention, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. These were not mistakes or misunderstandings. They were crimes committed by people who believed their badges placed them above the law. Reporters' hands shot up, but Attorney General Walsh continued. Additionally, our investigation revealed systematic negligence and misconduct at the Redstone detention facility. Multiple deaths were covered up. Medical care was routinely denied. Records were falsified to hide violations. In the front row, Administrator Claire Whitaker sat rigid, her corporate composure cracking as Attorney General Walsh announced, "The state has terminated its contract with Cornerstone Detention Services, effective immediately. The facility will be shut down pending comprehensive federal and state reviews of all deaths and incidents during their management." Mayor Curtis Beckett stepped to the podium next, looking uncomfortable but determined. I also announced that Police Chief Marcus Davidson has been removed from his position, effective immediately. His refusal to investigate federal officers who committed crimes in our jurisdiction was a dereliction of duty. We have appointed Interim Chief Sandra Martinez, who has committed to enforcing the law equally, regardless of what kind of badge someone wears. The crowd murmured approval. Several veterans nodded grimly. A church elder whispered, "About time." Inside the courthouse, the main hearing room was packed. Supervisor Victor Langford sat at the defense table, his usual swagger replaced by nervous fidgeting. His attorney kept whispering urgently in his ear, but Supervisor Victor Langford barely seemed to hear. Judge Elena Harper studied the charging documents carefully before looking up. The evidence presented here is deeply troubling. We have video footage, medical records, witness statements, and internal communications showing a coordinated effort to violate Commander Voss's rights and then cover it up. She fixed Supervisor Victor Langford with a stern gaze. "Would you like to address these charges?" Supervisor Victor Langford's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client was conducting legitimate enforcement operations against a confirmed U.S. military commander." Judge Elena Harper interrupted after her identity was verified. "Please do not insult this court's intelligence." When Commander Layla Voss took the stand, the room fell silent. She spoke clearly and precisely. describing events without embellishment or anger. She detailed the initial assault, the deliberate denial of her rights, the attempts to make her disappear into the system. Her calm recitation made the cruelty even more stark. "They knew who I was," she testified. "They knew I was Delta Force." But Supervisor Victor Langford said that did not matter anymore, that my service meant nothing here. Then he ordered agents to tase me and drag me away in front of my neighbors. Nurse Sofia Ramirez testified next, presenting carefully preserved records showing patterns of neglect and cover-ups. Her hands shook slightly as she described watching detainees suffer and die while treatment was denied. "We were told to write natural causes on everything," she said, "no matter what really happened." Other staff members came forward describing how Supervisor Victor Langford had ordered them to lose paperwork, deny calls, and isolate anyone who complained. One guard broke down describing how they were trained to make problems go away through transfers and isolation. The evidence mounted hour after hour: surveillance footage, email chains, falsified medical records, witness statements. Supervisor Victor Langford seemed to shrink in his chair as his actions were laid bare under fluorescent lights and sworn testimony. Judge Elena Harper listened intently, taking careful notes. When the last witness finished, she set down her pen and surveyed the courtroom. "The evidence presented here shows not just individual misconduct, but institutional failure on a massive scale. We have seen how quickly enforcement can become abuse when oversight fails and accountability disappears." She turned to where Commander Layla Voss sat. "Commander Voss, please rise." Commander Layla Voss stood ramrod straight. As Judge Elena Harper continued, "This court orders your immediate and unconditional release, with full restoration of status and privileges. Furthermore, all records related to this unlawful detention are to be expunged." The gavel crack echoed through the hushed room like a gunshot. The judge was not finished. "Additionally, given the overwhelming evidence of criminal conduct, this court orders Supervisor Victor Langford held without bail pending trial. The other charged officials will surrender their passports and remain under supervision." Supervisor Victor Langford's face went ash gray as bailiffs approached. His attorney started to object, but Judge Elena Harper cut him off. "Your client used detention as a weapon. Now he can experience it legally with all the rights he denied others." Outside, the crowd had grown larger. News helicopters circled overhead, their cameras capturing the scene as Supervisor Victor Langford was led out in handcuffs. Several of his former agents were already being processed in the courthouse basement. State investigators continued carrying boxes of evidence from their vehicles, computers, phones, hard drives, and files that documented years of abuse. Each piece would be cataloged, each incident investigated, each victim's story finally heard. The wheels of justice, so long stalled, had begun to turn. Morning sunlight crept across Commander Layla Voss's front lawn, painting long shadows across the same steps where everything had started. The dew sparkled on grass that had been trampled weeks ago by aggressive boots and struggling bodies. Now that memory felt distant as neighbors began gathering quietly in the cool morning air. Young neighbor Javier Ruiz stood with his parents near the maple tree where he had filmed that first violent encounter. His new phone stayed in his pocket. This was not a moment for recording. Other faces appeared gradually. Mrs. Elena Rivera from 2 doors down, walking slowly with her cane. The Rivera family from across the street. Pastor Marcus Hale with several church elders and a dozen veterans in pressed uniforms who had helped keep the pressure on City Hall. They assembled without fanfare or announcement. No police barriers, no news vans, no protesters with signs, just community members standing together in the gentle morning light. Their presence making a different kind of statement. Mayor Curtis Beckett arrived, looking humbled. his usual political polish replaced by genuine solemnity. The new interim police chief, Sandra Martinez, stood beside him in her crisp uniform, her face set with quiet determination. They carried a folder of official documents and a framed commendation. Commander Layla Voss emerged from her front door, wearing her Delta Force dress uniform, medals gleaming in the early light. She moved with the same controlled grace she had shown that first morning. But now there was peace in her stance, rather than tension. The crowd parted respectfully as she descended the steps. "Commander Voss," Mayor Beckett began, his voice carrying clearly in the morning stillness. "We gather here not just to honor your service, but to acknowledge our failure and commit to real change." He gestured to Chief Martinez, who stepped forward with the documents. "This morning, we are announcing the formation of the Community Justice Oversight Coalition." Chief Martinez stated, "It will be permanently funded and legally empowered to monitor law enforcement activities, investigate complaints, and ensure accountability at every level." She handed Commander Layla Voss the papers. "Your experience exposed systematic failures that can never be repeated. This coalition ensures that will not happen." A sustained murmur of approval rippled through the gathered neighbors. Several veterans nodded firmly, their faces stern with approval. The mayor then lifted the framed commendation. "Commander Voss, for your courage in facing unlawful detention, your discipline in pursuing justice rather than vengeance, and your dedication to ensuring lasting change, we present this official commendation." He paused, adding quietly, "It will not undo what happened, but it stands as public record that truth prevailed." Commander Layla Voss accepted the frame with a precise nod, then turned to address the gathering. Her voice carried clearly, measured, and strong. "Thank you. But this moment is not about medals or commendations." She gestured to Nurse Sofia Ramirez, who stood nervously at the edge of the crowd. "It is about a nurse who saw wrong and spoke up, risking everything." Nurse Sofia Ramirez stepped forward, blushing as Commander Layla Voss continued. "It is about a teenage neighbor who kept filming when others looked away." Javier Ruiz straightened his shoulders, standing taller as several people patted his back. "It is about veterans who would not let their oath be forgotten." Commander Layla Voss acknowledged the uniformed men and women. Church leaders who demanded moral courage from elected officials. Pastor Marcus Hale dabbed at his eyes. Families who showed up day after day until justice could not be ignored. She held up the coalition documents. "This is not just paper. It is proof that accountability is possible when community stands together, not with violence, not with vengeance, but with persistence and truth." Mrs. Elena Rivera thumped her cane emphatically. "Amen to that." Chief Martinez stepped forward again, her badge catching the morning light. "The coalition begins work immediately. We have already selected community representatives, legal advisors, and oversight committees. Every complaint will be investigated, every incident reviewed." "No exceptions," the mayor added. "The City Council has approved permanent funding and granted the coalition legal authority to access records, conduct investigations, and issue binding recommendations." This is not a symbolic gesture. It has real power to create change. Commander Layla Voss surveyed the gathered faces. Neighbors who had witnessed her humiliation now stood witness to this restoration. The street felt different, as if the community had awakened to its own strength. These were not just houses anymore. They were homes protected by shared vigilance. People began approaching Commander Layla Voss individually, offering quiet words of support or simply clasping her hand. Mrs. Elena Rivera hugged her fiercely, whispering, "We have got your back now, honey." The Rivera children presented her with a hand-drawn card, covered in wobbly stars. Javier Ruiz's parents thanked her for acknowledging their son's courage. "You showed him that doing the right thing matters," Javier Ruiz's father said, his voice rough with emotion. Nurse Sofia Ramirez approached last, still seeming unsure of her place. Commander Layla Voss gripped her hands firmly. "Without your evidence, none of this happens," she said quietly. "You chose truth over fear. That is real courage." The gathering dispersed gradually, neighbors returning to their homes with new purpose. The veterans offered crisp salutes, which Commander Layla Voss returned sharply. Pastor Marcus Hale promised to keep the coalition in his prayers. Chief Martinez confirmed their first meeting would be next week. Soon only the morning remained peaceful and bright. The maple leaves rustled gently where Javier Ruiz had stood filming. A delivery truck drove past without slowing. Just another normal morning on a street that had found its voice. Commander Layla Voss climbed her front steps one more time, the commendation tucked under her arm. Coalition papers held carefully. The same door that had witnessed violation now opened to welcome her home. She stepped inside, closed it gently behind her, and for the first time since that dawn days ago, breathed in peace. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.